Most of our urban schools are failing miserably.
When you go to, the Jefferson Memorial, one of the things on the wall is, it is the task of a government to educate its citizens.
What's behind that door? That door, they struggled to open. They couldn't get that door open. I said, what's behind that door? What's behind that door? Couldn't get that door open. I stepped back. Welcome to class. We are not serving our kids in the way in which they need to be served.
We took the LA Times reporter went to interview our students that were graduating, and it was heartbreaking story. Let me see if I can keep it together. But so this kid who was had entered 10th grade at Locke. When we took over, he was already got it, and he had entered 10th grade with 0 credits. 0. Right? He had made no connections with anybody, and he had flunked all his courses. And he's going to UCLA aeronautic engineering. He said that nobody gave a shit in his family. His father doesn't care. He says he can't, his father wanted him to work at McDonald's and become a McDonald's manager. That it's a waste of his education to go to UCLA. And if you think about that, it's, and he said the only people who really care about my future are the people in this school. And you cannot build that level of community and that level of relationship if you don't have a small school. If you don't have, you have an advisor that follows you your entire 4 years. If you don't have a set of 10, 15 teachers that actually know your name and stuff like that, you can't build that in a school of 3,000. You can't have that level of, our kids were numbers. There's this girl that switched to Anima Pep Brown, one of our schools, and said, I switched because my name was a number. I got called as 86, 26, 43, 14, AF 14, and that was my number.
Say, for instance, as we break down these huge behemoths of a school, sometimes serving thousands and thousands of students, where they're kids feel very anonymous, they feel like a number, they feel like they're not cared for. We want to break those into smaller units, but as we do that, some of the key resources need to go to the student to personalize things for them. So distributing adults around the space, so they don't have to cross all the way across campus to see a counselor. How can we make those resources more personalized and right at students' fingertips?
From our point of view, a lot of what we do, kind of from a design standpoint, is sort of like, professionalizing the teaching environment. There are some really simple things that are involved in doing that. The kind of natural kind of circumstances of the room, the lighting, the acoustics, and things like that all kind of contribute to whether or not the teaching in a room is a source of fatigue or something that kind of supports what you're trying to communicate. So those things are the kind of basics of it. I think teaching spaces ought to be dramatic and ought to be impressive, and those and so there's this whole sort of urgency of scrutinizing the sort of monotony and kind of really banal types of classrooms that are the norm.
One of the things that architects can do is to bring really creative structures for young people that are a demonstrable sign that we think you're valuable. I used to think, driving around town looking at public schools in LA, they must have hired one architect 50 or 70 years ago and said, build a bunch of rectangles and paint them the most bilious colors you can. Because that's what you used to see. It's just these one ugly building after another. And what's the message to a kid who already lives in an ugly neighborhood, filled full of graffiti and violence and garbage and homeless people and drunks on the street and so on, and then he comes to a school that's ugly?
Design often tells us how to behave. Architecture, when we go into a cathedral, it says something about how to behave. When we go to a sports arena, it says something about how to behave. So what types of behaviors will we encourage in the design of our schools? How can we design spaces that are very focused on learning, and learning in creative and powerful ways, not the passive didactic kind of methodologies?
I've been banging my head against traditional education for over 40 years, trying to see how things could be different for the learning lives of kids in schools. And it's been 40 very frustrating years. I think as we begin to rethink the organization of schooling, responding probably a lot to the financial difficulties in public schools, there really is this opportunity to rethink staffing patterns, to rethink school organizations, to rethink instructional processes, to rethink when and where schooling actually happens. And as we think those thoughts, there have to be implications for the design of future schools.
The world is changing radically. Kids are using technologies in ways heretofore they never have been able to before. They're a generation that is learning in different ways, and information is at their fingertips. So the question is, how will they access that information? What will they do with it? And where will they learn? Because really learning happens everywhere. It happens in the home, it happens in the neighborhood, it happens at school. It doesn't just have to happen in a place. But if we believe Clay Christensen, who wrote Disrupting Class, a Harvard professor, that by 2018 or 19, half of all high school learning will occur online, we have to think about what that means and what are the implications for the learning environments that we're going to build going forward, because they're a big investment.
What I don't see is a model that you say, oh, here's the answer. And let's just do this. It works good. Look at it. It works really good here in this community for this group of kids, with this group of teachers, with that leader. To say that you're going to take that and let's just do that everywhere, I definitely don't see that. What I see more is, I see more experimentation around education. I see more and more willingness to take risk. I think without talking about exactly what the school of the future might look like, I think we need to see educators willing to take more risk and willing to say, yeah, we understand there's this thing, no child left behind, right? There's these test scores we have to achieve, and we have to meet AYP, or at least we want to. But the way we're going to get to that is not by sitting in a classroom all day drilling our students on how to take a math test or how to score the best on the reading test. We're going to get to that by creative, inventive curriculum that engages kids that on a multitude of levels across disciplines, and they're going to get that stuff this way. And in getting to that point, they're going to be much more engaged, much more excited about their education.
If we're going to change the status quo, we need to challenge a lot of assumptions. We need to bring folks together. We need to change the paradigm. When we see things that we know in our heart of hearts just aren't right, who will have the moral courage to say it, to acknowledge it, and then to do something different about it? Who will stand up? Because the kids who usually need the most get the least, and we tend to accept what we're giving kids, and for many of them, we're completely misserving.